Lyra stood still near the edge of the grand transport ship's landing ramp, her golden skin glowing faintly under the pale light of Earth's atmosphere above her. The sky stretched endlessly in a strange calm blue, something her homeworld had never known. Around her, the alien guards in dark armor flanked her, but even they seemed uneasy, unsure how to react in this new land, this new fate that awaited her, because today she was not a warrior, not a symbol of her empire's strength. She was simply a bride being given away to a stranger from another species. Her heart pounded harder than during any battle or training session on her world. She had faced beasts with claws the size of her arms. She had stood against firestorms in the war zones of the outer moons. But nothing ever made her feel like this, not fear. No, this was something colder, heavier, something like dread. Her people told stories of human stories, wrapped in warnings of violence, rage, and unpredictability. They were creatures of instinct and impulse, ruled not by logic, but by emotion, and she was being sent to one of them. Was not her choice. The treaty demanded Union blood for peace, tradition for security. The council decided, and she obeyed for her people. For the future. From across the landing field, she saw him standing still. His figure was broad, powerful, wrapped in simple clothing, but something about his posture was strange. He was not armored, he held no weapon, he stood alone beside a vehicle that seemed too old, too worn to belong to someone who was supposed to be a dangerous warrior. His head turned slightly as if acknowledging her presence, but he didn't speak, he didn't move. His face was unreadable. A translator drone buzzed quietly near her ear, feeding her basic Earth languages and customs, but even the machine's soft voice could not comfort her as she took her first steps toward the vehicle. Her guards remained behind, obeying the rules of the treaty. Now her journey would be alone. He opened the door for her without a word. His eyes met hers only briefly, then looked away again. Not in disrespect, but in something she couldn't name. He stepped into the vehicle and waited, and after a moment of hesitation, she did the same. The seat was strange, firm but warm, and the scent in the air was filled with wood, smoke, and earth. The ride was silent, the path winding through forests filled with life she had never seen before. Tall trees, birds calling from high above, colors too bright, too wild. She had studied Earth for weeks before arriving, but no amount of holograms or simulations could prepare her for the overwhelming closeness of this world. He drove carefully, hands steady, eyes forward now. And then he glanced in the mirror, not at her, but at the road behind. Perhaps it was a habit, or perhaps he was also unsure of her. After hours of silence, the vehicle reached a small structure, nestled between hills and trees. It was unlike anything she had known. Her people lived in great towers of light and metal, controlled by machines and energy. This place was made of wood, stone, earth. Everything felt grounded, everything felt old and alive. Stepped out and opened the door again, offering his hand, not forcing, not grabbing, just offering. She hesitated again, then stepped out without taking either. Nodded once, and walked toward the cabin. The door creaked open, and warm air poured out, carrying the scent of fire and food. Her stomach tightened, not in hunger but confusion. Why would a savage human prepare a meal before his new wife arrived inside? The home was simple but strangely ordered. A table made of rough wood, chairs, worn but clean, books lined one wall, and near the fire sat a small woven mat with tools neatly arranged. He motioned toward a room down a hallway, then walked away toward the back of the house. She entered the room. It was small but not prison-like. A bed, a window, a small shelf. She checked for traps, checked for hidden weapons, but found none. Just a folded blanket, a cup of water, a single flower resting in a jar beside the window, its petals trembling slightly in the breeze. That night she did not sleep. She sat near the window, watching the moon drift across the sky, wondering if it was the same moon he watched from his side of the cabin. She had locked the door, using both the electronic seal and the manual bar. Her fingers trembled. When she did it, she told herself it was strategy, precaution, not fear. She replayed every story she had heard. Humans were emotional, wild, unpredictable. They yelled, they fought, they broke things. When angry, they did not understand honor the way her people did. but he had not raised his voice. He had not touched her, he had not stared or spoken. He was not what she had expected, and that made it worse. What did it mean if the monster they warned her about was not a monster at all? In the darkness of her room, she wrapped herself in the unfamiliar blanket, listening closely for every sound, every creak, every step, but none came. The house remained quiet. The fire outside crackled softly, but he did not approach her door. He did not test the lock. Lyra lay down, still clothed, her eyes never leaving the ceiling, as thoughts raced through her mind. Who was this man? What did he want from her? And why did the silence feel heavier than words outside? The wind moved through the trees, whispering in a language older than both their worlds, and deep in the night, the stars above watched a warrior bride begin to question everything she thought she knew about fear. This was not the war she had trained for. This was something else, something stranger, something that required no weapons, only patience and the courage to face the unknown. And as the sky slowly turned to morning, Lyra realized that this was not just the start of a treaty. This was the beginning of a truth she would have to uncover, one quiet moment at a time. Morning sun rose gently over the hills, casting long shadows through the trees. As Lyra stood beside the small window in her room, watching the forest breathe with soft movement, birds fluttered between branches, their song sharp and strange, yet oddly calming. The air smelled clean, full of moisture and pine. Her body ached, not from travel but from tension. Her sleep had been light, broken by every rustle outside, every shift in the wooden walls, her mind still tangled in worry. She moved quietly through the hallway, her steps measured, alert, ready for any change or sudden movement. The house was still. He was already outside his form, moving slowly through the tall grass beside the cabin, carrying something long and heavy. It looked like an axe, though, unlike the war axes of her people. This one was designed for cutting trees. Lyra stayed behind the window, watching him swing the tool with clean, precise strength. Each motion controlled, smooth, no rage, no grunting. Just quiet work, like he had done this 1,000 times. His muscles flexed under the morning light, but there was no display, no effort to intimidate. He worked because it needed to be done, not to prove anything later. She heard the soft clatter of pans in the small kitchen area, and when she peeked from behind the doorway, she saw a bowl of something steaming left on the table, with a spoon beside it and a folded piece of cloth, perhaps meant to serve as a napkin. He was not in the room. He had left her space untouched. Her stomach growled faintly, and she stepped closer, drawn by the smell. It was unfamiliar but warm. Her fingers hovered over the bowl, then carefully lifted the spoon to taste it. The flavor was strange but not unpleasant, a mixture of root vegetables and something earthy and thick. She ate slowly, her eyes never leaving the door, unsure if he would return suddenly and sit across from her. But he did not. She finished the meal, left the bowl as it was, and returned to her room. The unease in her chest had shifted slightly. It was still there, but no longer sharp like a blade. Now it felt more like a fog. The day passed in quiet rhythm. He worked outside, tending to animals that lived in a small pen behind the cabin. Goats, chickens, a dog with soft brown fur that wagged its tail every time he passed. The dog watched her through the window with curious eyes but never barked. He repaired part of the roof, climbed trees, gathered fruits, and even stacked stones. Near the edge of a stream that ran past the property, he did not speak or approach her. He simply moved through his world like she was not yet part of it, like he was waiting. By the third day, her anxiety had transformed into something stranger. Not trust, not comfort, but confusion. Her lessons had prepared her for aggression, yelling dominance, attempts to control. But this man offered none of that. His silence was not cold. It was peaceful. That night, she wandered toward the fire that crackled outside the cabin, the sky above full of stars, too many to count, and unfamiliar constellations blinked in patterns she had never learned. He sat near the flames, sharpening a tool, his face calm, lit orange by the fire. He did not look at her, but he noticed her presence. His hands slowed, then rested the blade beside him. He reached down, pulled a second log into the flames, and the fire grew warmer. She sat on a stone not far from Her body tense, ready to run if needed, but he did not move. He picked up a small notebook, opened it, and began to write something. Her eyes drifted to the cover. It had a symbol from her language, one that meant understanding. After a long stretch of silence, he closed the book and finally turned toward her. His voice came gentle, deep, and quiet. "Hello," just one word, but it shook her like thunder. She stared, not in fear, but in disbelief. He had spoken in her language, not perfectly, but clearly enough. Mouth opened, slightly unsure how to reply. He nodded slowly, as if to say, "It's all right, I just wanted you to know I see you." She managed to whisper back the same word, though hers came softer, almost broken. "Hello." He smiled only a little, then stood and walked inside, not slamming the door, not leaving her behind, just giving her space. She remained by the fire a long time after he left, staring at the flames as her heart settled into a new kind of rhythm. That one word had changed something inside her, a crack in the armor she had worn since birth. Perhaps this place was not a prison, and perhaps this man was not a threat. She had come prepared to fight, survive, resist. Now she found herself wondering what it meant to listen. Maybe this was the real test of strength, not war, but the patience to wait for someone to stop being afraid. And maybe, just maybe, he had passed that test long before she even arrived. As the fire burned lower and the wind whispered through the trees, Lyra finally felt something like rest. She rose, walked back into the cabin, and left her door unlocked. For the first time, days passed quietly in the forest cabin, and each morning brought a new pattern to Lyra's thoughts. Where once fear had ruled, now there was a stirring of curiosity. Something about this place, this silence, this man was beginning to feel different from everything she had been taught. She still watched him from a distance, never too close, but never as far as before. Each moment felt like a test of her judgment, her instincts telling her to be alert, but her senses slowly whispering that perhaps danger no longer lived here. Human, moved with purpose, not like a soldier, but like someone who understood the rhythm of the world around him. He woke early, prepared meals, tended to his animals, and mended whatever needed fixing, and through it all he barely spoke, not from coldness, but from a strange kind of respect. He did not demand attention, he did not command space, he simply lived as though he belonged to the land itself. Lyra found herself studying him more than she intended. The way he rubbed the dog's ears before feeding it, the way he hummed low melodies while working near the garden, the way he paused at sunset to watch the sky change its colors, as if that quiet transformation mattered to him more than anything else. It confused her, it softened her. She began eating every meal he left for her, and in return she cleaned the bowl once and placed it on the counter, folded a small towel beside it neatly and carefully. It was a gesture not expected of her by treaty, law, or custom, but it felt right. And when she saw the towel replaced the next day with a fresh one, she understood that he had noticed one morning. She found a piece of paper near her breakfast, a short message written in careful letters. "Hope you slept well." The writing was clumsy, as if he was not used to her language, but he had tried. The words were plain but sincere. Her fingers lingered on the paper for a long moment, then she wrote a reply with equal simplicity. "Thank you for the food." She left the note where he had left his, and when she returned later, she found a different note resting in its place. Welcome. A single exchange of paper felt like more than any official ceremony, more than any training, more than any weapon. They had each crossed a small invisible line, not as enemies, not even as strangers, but as people attempting to understand. That evening they sat near the fire again, not side by side, but close enough that she could hear the quiet breath from his chest and feel the warmth, not just from the flames, but from the peace in his silence. He held a book written in her language and traced the pages with slow focus. She asked without planning, the question rising from her mouth before she could stop it. "Why do you try to learn my words?" He looked up, surprised, not that she had spoken, but that she had chosen to ask something real. His answer came slowly, thoughtful, "So I don't say the wrong thing." She studied his face, the way he looked down again after speaking, not shy but aware, as if he respected the weight of words. She felt something shift again. Her understanding of him deepening layer by quiet layer. They began to talk more each day, not much at first, only small questions and answers, names of plants, customs of food, differences between weather on their two worlds. He listened carefully, and never mocked her for what she did not know even. When she described how her people saw humans, he did not flinch or grow angry. He only nodded and said, "I can understand why they'd think that." Honesty in his voice made her chest ache a little. Soon, she started helping with small tasks, not because she was told to, but because the cabin began to feel less like a cage and more like a shared space. She helped with gathering herbs, sorting tools, tending the animals, even feeding the dog whose name she learned was Moss, a name that made her smile softly every time she said it. They laughed once together when she slipped in mud and fell beside the stream. Her robes soaked, her pride wounded, but his laughter was gentle, not mocking. He helped her up with both hands, steady and warm, and for the first time she laughed too, a real laugh, not one of power or diplomacy, but one of simple release. One night, after many such days, they sat on the porch together, watching the stars, and she asked him something she had wondered from the beginning. "Why didn't you speak the first day I arrived?" He took a long breath and answered in a voice low and clear, "Because I could see you were afraid, and I didn't want to make it worse." Her eyes met his, and something inside her cracked open, like the first thaw of ice after a long winter. That night she did not return to her room. Immediately she stayed longer by the fire, talking about constellations on her world, about the storms that danced across her skies, and the trees that glowed with soft light. He listened, like every word she said was important, like her memories mattered. When she finally rose to leave, he surprised her by offering a simple gift, a small wooden carving shaped like a bird, something he had whittled from fallen branches. Its wings spread as if ready to fly. She took it in both hands, touched by the gesture, and said softly, "Thank you." He replied with the same simple warmth, "You re-welcome." No more walls, no more armor, just two voices in the quiet night, slowly building something fragile and new, something neither of them had expected. Days turned softer with time, as if the forest around them had begun to accept the bond growing quietly inside the cabin. Lyra no longer woke in fear. She now walked with ease through the hall, her hands brushing the wooden walls, as if the house itself had started to welcome her. The silence between her and Ben no longer felt heavy. It had become something gentle, filled with unspoken understanding. Each morning they greeted each other with calm voices, sometimes with a small smile, sometimes with shared tea, and the warmth of routine brought comfort she had never known. She no longer looked over her shoulder, expecting the trap. Instead, she looked at him as someone real, someone she could sit beside without needing a weapon on her belt. She had begun to teach him more of her language, and in return, he showed her how to tend the soil, how to fix broken tools, how to listen to the trees when they warned of storms. Their days became a quiet pattern of effort and peace, and their nights slowly filled with stories of two worlds, so far apart, yet now so closely tied. But peace never lives unchallenged. It was late afternoon when she noticed something wrong. The wind shifted, carrying a scent too sharp, too familiar, the scent of fuel and metal and anger. She froze, her senses sharpened, her hands clenched by her sides. She stepped out into the open. Just as a streak of light cut across the sky, something fast descending through the clouds. Ben looked up from the garden, his expression shifting instantly, not in fear but focus. He moved beside her, without a word, but his presence was steady, calm, ready. She knew that shape, she knew the design of that craft. Only one group would dare cross treaty lines so boldly. Only one faction had refused the peace talks and called the Union a betrayal. They had come for her. The ship landed hard behind the tree line, its engines burning, the grass black, and before the smoke cleared, 6 figures stepped into view. Their armor dark, their eyes cold, weapons drawn and aimed forward. Their leader stepped out and raised a signal. In the language of her people, "You will return with us. The human is no longer needed. The treaty is a lie." Lyra stood firm, her body tense, Her voice cold like steel forged in silence. I do not belong to you. You belong to your blood, to your people, to your purpose. She looked at Ben and found him watching quietly, his hands empty, but his eyes burning, not with anger, but something deeper, something protective, something steady. The soldiers moved forward. She stepped in front of Ben, her arms raised not to surrender but to shield him. They saw her not as one of them, but as a traitor. They aimed their weapons and shouted again, "Move, or be removed." She reached for nothing, and still stood strong, her voice rising like thunder across the clearing. This man gave me respect without demand. He gave me safety without chains. He gave me space to breathe when you only gave me orders. They fired. She leapt, her body moved faster than they expected. Every lesson, every strike, every hour in the combat chambers of her youth returned to her like a storm. She knocked the first soldier back, disarmed the second, spun low, and sent another to the ground. Her hands moved like wind, her feet steady as stone. One grabbed Ben, pulled him down. He grunted in pain as something sliced across his arm. Blood ran fast. Lyra saw red, not from injury, but from fury. She broke free from the last soldier and slammed her shoulder into the one holding Ben, tearing him away. She crouched beside him, her hands moving quickly to stop the bleeding, then stood again over him, her stance wide, her chest heaving, her voice full of fire. You call him savage, but he has shown more honor in silence than any of you have in words. They hesitated. She took one step forward, then another, her eyes unblinking, her breath steady, her blood humming with power. Leave this place. The leader glared, but gave the signal. The remaining soldiers stepped back, their faces unreadable, their bodies bruised. They returned to their ship, and within minutes, the sky split again. As their craft vanished into the cloud silence, Fellbirds began to sing again, as if nature itself had been holding its breath. Lyra dropped to her knees beside Ben and pressed cloth to his wound. His eyes locked with hers, and she saw no fear, no question. Only quiet trust. You should have let me handle it, he whispered, his voice rough from pain. You are not alone anymore. She answered, not with a smile, but with a truth too strong to be soft. She helped him to his feet, guided him back into the house, every step marked with resolve. She cleaned the wound, wrapped it tight, gave him water, and rested beside him without words. That night no fire burned outside, no stories were told, and no laughter echoed through the trees. But inside the small cabin something stronger than fire lived between them, not built from peace or silence this time, but born from action, from choice, from standing together when it mattered most. Had defended him not because she had to, not because the treaty demanded it, but because she wanted to, because he had become more than a stranger, more than a symbol. He had become her reason to fight, and now the war was no longer between their worlds, but between old lies and the new truth they had built together. The morning after the attack came with quiet rain, gentle and steady, falling across the roof, like a song of peace, as if the sky itself wished to wash away the violence that had passed. The forest seemed calm again, its creatures moving through the wet grass and the wind, carrying only the sound of leaves rustling slowly. Lyra stood near the window, her eyes watching the world with a different gaze, no longer filled with fear or distance, but with thought and depth. Inside the cabin, Ben rested on the long couch, his arm wrapped in clean cloth, the wound now healing, his breath slow, and even as sleep held him gently. She had not left his side since the moment they stepped back inside. She had sat beside him, cleaned his injury, changed the bandage, checked his pulse again and again, and now she stood watching him with a quiet kind of care. His face looked tired but peaceful, the lines around his eyes softer in sleep than in waking, and in that moment, she saw him not as a human, not as a figure from a different world, but simply as a man who had offered her space without pressure, comfort without noise, and safety without expectation. She turned from the window and walked toward the table, where the wooden bird he had carved still rested, its wings spread as if ready to fly. She picked it up, traced the smooth edges with her fingers, and held it close for a moment, thinking about everything that had changed since she arrived. She remembered the first time She saw him from the ramp of her ship, how her heart raced with fear, how she imagined him as a monster built from the stories her people told, and now she remembered his voice. The first time he spoke the way he said, "Hello," like it carried no danger, only hope. She stepped outside into the light. Rain, her feet bare against the soft soil, and lifted her face to the sky. She breathed in the clean air, let the drops touch her skin, and for the first time, she felt that this land had become part of her, that she had become part of it, not as a prisoner, not as a visitor, but as someone who had chosen to stay. When she returned to the cabin, Ben was awake, his eyes following her as she walked in and sat beside him without a word. For a moment, they shared the silence. Then she looked at him and asked something simple yet full of meaning. "Do you regret?" I raised an eyebrow, slightly unsure what she meant. "Bringing me here, letting me stay." His answer came without pause, without hesitation. "Never." She nodded once, her lips pressing together in a way that looked almost like a smile, but deeper, more honest. "You could have fought back when they attacked," she said softly. "You could have picked up a weapon, but you didn't." Looked at his arm, then back at her, and his voice was calm, steady. "I didn't need to fight when you were willing to stand for both of us." Those words stayed with her long after they stopped speaking later. That day a message arrived through the old communication device, sitting in the corner of the room. The Central Council from her homeworld had sent a formal letter apologizing for the breach of treaty, expressing shame for the actions of the extremists, and offering her the choice to return or remain. The message was clear. The choice was now hers. She read it slowly, then placed the device down, walked to Ben, and said in a voice that left no space for doubt, "I am staying." Said nothing, but his eyes softened, his shoulders relaxed, and in that quiet moment, they understood more than any words could ever explain. The days that followed were filled with new steps. She began building a small garden of her own near his. She painted a symbol from her culture on the side of the house, not as a mark of difference, but as a bridge between two worlds. He began learning more words from her language, practicing them with awkward charm, while she corrected him with quiet laughter. They worked together, they cooked together, and each evening they sat near the fire, sometimes speaking, sometimes watching the stars, sometimes simply listening to the world breathe around them. One evening she sat beside him, holding the wooden bird again, her fingers moving over its shape. Slowly then she turned to him and asked, "Why did you carve this?" He looked at it, then at her, and his answer came like the truth he always carried. "Because it reminded me of you, something strong, something wild, something made to fly." Her breath caught for just a second, then she leaned closer and placed the bird gently on the table. "You know," she said softly, "I think I was never afraid of you. I think I was afraid of what would happen if you were not what they said you were." He didn't speak right away, only reached out and took her hand, not as a demand, not as a claim, but as a promise. And when she looked down at their hands together, she saw not two different worlds, but one joined path. Story of the alien bride and the savage human had not ended in fear or violence. It had grown into something neither side had expected, a truth built not through orders or rules, but through kindness and time and choice. Word of their bond spread slowly, first through whispers, then through stories. The treaty between their people gained new strength, not from power, but from proof that understanding was possible. In time others came to visit, the cabin leaders, scholars, curious minds, all eager to see the place where silence had spoken louder than war, where a hello had changed the course of two worlds. But for Lyra and Ben, none of that mattered more than the quiet moments. They continued to share the meals cooked together, the steps walked side by side, the garden blooming with flowers from two planets, and the life they had chosen to build, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. And one quiet evening, as the stars returned to their places above the trees, Lyra leaned close to Ben and whispered the same word he had once offered her, so gently, "Hello," and this time it meant everything. The end.